I don't think it's a shock to anybody to say that we all have in our memories recorded where we were the first time that we opened our phone or turned on the news and saw what was happening in Israel, more than likely around October 8 in the morning, and looking at our phones in disbelief and since every day that we read the news, we continue to be in disbelief, and we're sort of dragging this continuous trauma as a community that we haven't been able to start the healing process while things in Israel might be going a little different. The rise of anti-Semitism and the attacks on the Jewish community around the world have added to this continuous trauma that we were seeing in our community and around the Jewish people. So we wanted to partner with Jewish Family Services to talk about ways that we can, although the situation continues to happen, how can we start thinking about how as a community we can start healing and we can start building some resolution to what has been and continues to be over 117 days a continuous trauma for our community. We're so pleased to have Dr. Nadine Bean and Stuart Horowitz, who's not a doctor, but it is a member of the Maimonides Society because we welcome all medical professionals. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with their bios because I believe it's in the presentation. I'm going to go over it, but I just wanted to say after we're done here, if you have extra few more minutes to stay over, we have thank you calls, we have solicitation calls, and all the money that we raise today goes directly back to our agencies benefiting Jewish Family Services, the Jewish Day School, and the JCC where we sit. We're raising the money today to allocate the money tomorrow. So all of your help is really appreciated. And if you haven't made your gift, this is the day to do your gift. And thank you everybody for being here, and I'll pass the microphone to our presenters.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stand up because I am just much more comfortable standing up and coming in front of the table rather than sitting. Thank you everybody for coming today. I love dad jokes. Okay? I love dad jokes. They're so funny. They're funny because they're so bad. And when I tell a dad joke, with my son, we share dad jokes a lot, and him and I will laugh, okay? And I tell a dad joke to my son or my wife and daughter, they go, oh God. And so when I tell the dad joke, feel free to laugh, that's preferable, or you can go, oh God, that's okay too. So one of the things we're going to do at the end of this presentation is some mindfulness exercises to move us along with the healing process. Mindfulness is about awareness, so keep that in mind when I tell this dad joke. Here we go. I have a pet wolf, and I taught him mindfulness. Ready for it? And now he's a werewolf. There you go, we got some laughs. We got some laughs. Ah! When I was growing up, one of my favorite groups, and still are, I still love listening to the music, was Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yeah. And one of my favorite albums was their In Concert album. And the first song on that album was The Times They Are Changing. And I think we all can relate to that The Times They Are Changing. After that first song, I don't know if it was Paul Stuckey or Peter Yarrow, they welcomed the audience. And their introduction went something like this. He says, you know, we know you all know our songs, and you're probably going to really want to sing. Please don't. And it got some laughs. As we present today, you may really want to express some political opinions, other opinions. They're important. But what I'm going to ask you is to please don't. We're here to talk about trauma. We're here as mental health professionals to help start the healing process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bean. She'll take it from here.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. And I hope that this presentation and our discussion toward the end will be meaningful and helpful. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm a recently retired professor in the Master of Social Work program at Westchester University. And I worked for over 20 years in disaster mental health services with the Red Cross. And my first assignment was up in Lower Manhattan after 9/11. I've worked after Hurricane Katrina. I've worked many local, regional, and national disasters. I no longer deploy to disaster sites, but my beginning work as a social worker was providing in-home family support services to families who had children 0 to 3 with some type of developmental delays or disabilities. And many times those families were living in poverty. This was in Baltimore County, and many times they experienced trauma. I also volunteer with a national organization called Give an Hour. We provide pro bono mental health services to veterans and military families and active duty military members. So there's a recurring theme here, and that is that I've worked with a lot of traumatized individuals. I'm not Jewish, but I am on my maternal side 100% Ukrainian. And so my motherland, ancestral land, is under siege as well. And my great-grandparents, my great-maternal grandparents perished in the Holodomor. So with that, welcome again. I also currently work with an organization called Resilient Lehigh Valley, and I'm the director of training for Resilient Lehigh Valley. And this is I need my glasses on. This is a community-driven effort to promote hope, healing from trauma, and build resilience in youth, families, and communities by creating a trauma-responsive and culturally responsive Lehigh Valley. We work with both lay and professional audiences, training about the impact of trauma on lifelong health, and also ways to find hope and build resilience despite trauma. We've listed all the values up here, but I just want to point out a couple of Resilient Lehigh Valley, because many of these slides were developed by Resilient Lehigh Valley, and then Stuart and I fine-tuned them for our particular needs today, this morning, in our audience. Okay? And that is adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACEs, and other traumas, including historical and intergenerational traumas, can have a tremendous impact on lifelong health, across the lifespan. That protective factors exist, such as safe and supportive relationships, positive childhood experiences, or PCEAs. They play an important role in helping to prevent and overcome ACEs and other traumas. The key word is connection and community. And through our connections, bloodline, our cultural connections, etc., that is how we begin to create hope and build resilience. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So there are some group agreements for us today. We want you to be curious and open. So it's not necessarily to agree, to have everyone in this room agree. That's impossible. It's to gain a deeper understanding, accept some discomfort, and co-create community. And, confidentiality, leave what is said and take what is learned. and stay engaged and practice self-care. And we're going to, especially Stu, is going to help you practice self-care tools that you can bring home. Okay, you're next, right?
So some starting points for today. So we are going to be discussing trauma, how it affects us individually, and how it affects us collectively and as a community. You know, we've all seen the rise of anti-Semitism before October 7th, and we've seen an increase in it since October 7th, 400%. And I looked at the statistics for that from the FBI, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it went up by hundreds. We know that we're experiencing it on college campuses and even in our grade school. Trauma is very powerful. It impacts us individually, and it impacts us as a community. It can impact our health. You know, as a therapist, I saw many people who suffered from trauma and had physical problems, whether it was diabetes, obesity, alcoholism. It has a lifelong impact. And we as a community know that. We don't have to talk about the Holocaust or pogroms or other horrible things that have happened in our history. We know about oppression. But to heal means to have hope and to have resilience. We can bend, but we will not break.
Yep, sorry about that.
I'm back again. So, our objectives for today. We're going to define some terms. So we're going to talk about what ACE and PCE means. We're going to look at the health implications and historical effects of trauma. We're also going to discuss how to find hope, how to find resilience. And we're going to provide you with some resources when we're done. Now I'm done.
Okay, there is hope. There's despair going on right now. I'm not going to invalidate that. We all feel it. But there is hope. Having experienced the powerful impact of adverse childhood experiences and other traumas, such as historical and intergenerational traumas, does not mean we are permanently broken. We are powerfully impacted. We cannot erase traumatic memories. And they're being ripped open today because of what's going on in Israel and Gaza. But we can, just as the brain can be hurt, so it can be healed in however small ways. And we can build resilience and healthy coping mechanisms.
My God, have wounds been opened? We at one time thought we were safe. I don't think we feel safe anymore. We have to acknowledge those wounds. Not to acknowledge them is to be in denial. And if you're in denial, which is a strong defense mechanism, you can't deal with it. We have to acknowledge that we're wounded, that we're hurt, maybe we're angry, we're scared, or afraid. We have to acknowledge that. We have to keep an open space for that as well. So what do I mean by that? I like to use this metaphor. We acknowledge the wounds and the hurt and the pain, and we process it. And then we put it in a closet and we lock it up. So we know that it's there, but we are not going to obsess on it. We are going to look at it, and we're going to look for ways that we're going to heal and move on. Every so often, we can unlock that closet and open it up and take a look. Maybe we look at it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, close it up, and move on. October 7th blew that door open. And we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our community, and I think to the world, to acknowledge that closet, but to take it, let people know we are wounded. We are wounded. And you're probably going to hear how emphatic I am right now, but we are not going to take it anymore. We were silent 90 years ago. We won't be silent today, and I believe that is part of healing. But we don't need to obsess on it. We need to take the door, rebuild it, but know that it's there and open it up when we need to open it up.
Okay. So what is trauma anyway? It's an event, it's an effect, it's an experience. So it can be a single event, a catastrophic event, like a, 9/11, okay? Or a series of events over time, series of catastrophic events over time, like continued child maltreatment over years, or, war and war crime experiences, okay, over time. Traumatic events are also effects. They're experienced physically, viscerally. I'm right in the light here, the projection light. Or emotionally harmful, or feel life-threatening, okay? And it's your perception of it feeling life-threatening that matters, not if it's absolutely scientifically proven that it's life-threatening, okay? And then experiences. They result in lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So examples here, and I'm not going to read through these examples, I'll pick a few here. Physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, a crime or other violation committed against you, war and combat experiences, refugee and immigrant experiences, accidents, secondary or vicarious trauma, and historical or racial trauma, and intergenerational. Let's take a moment about talking about historical and intergenerational trauma and what we mean by that. Okay? It's a form of trauma that in fact impacts entire communities and cultures. Okay? So it's cumulative. Emotional, psychological wounding resulting from group traumatic experiences. So for African Americans, the legacies of enslavement. For our Jewish community, the centuries of oppression and discrimination and atrocities, and of course, the Holocaust. So the result is traumatic stress that's experienced across generations. And research at the cellular level, like functional MRIs of the brain, actually show changes in the brain structure. And we are learning, and have learned over the last couple of decades, that survivors of the Holocaust or other atrocities like it may pass on those little brain changes through what's known as epigenetics. So it's not just one generation that has been directly impacted by something like the Holocaust, but the children and grandchildren also learn this kind of heightened awareness and worry about environment. Okay? And it's not only about what has happened in the past, but also what is still happening. So that's, since October 7th, it is happening again. So, as I said, research has shown that trauma can impact lifelong health. It can cause significant mental health concerns and challenges in a person's life. All right, I'm just going to touch on this really quick. But just to say, adverse childhood experiences are actually pretty common. Probably most of us in this room have experienced that, one or more adverse childhood experiences. And you can see that in a couple of studies, they've shown that 61% of those surveyed in a research study that included 144,000 adults across 25 states between 2015 and 17, 61% reported experiencing at least one adverse childhood experience. The impact of trauma is actually cumulative. So early life traumatic experiences change the brain in little ways, but as your life goes on and you experience other forms of trauma, and I would say that post October 7th, everyone in this room has experienced a ripping open of those traumatic memories, and they accumulate. So if a person had adverse childhood experiences, then was in the military and experienced war or war crimes, discrimination and oppression, going on and on. They accumulate, which means that the brain changes and your hyper-awareness grows. There's a dose-response relationship between the number of adverse childhood experiences and other trauma and negative health outcomes. So this there is the pointer. This on the left were the original set of 10 adverse childhood experiences first identified at the end of the 90s. Expanded ACEs, which really were conceived of by Dr. Roy Wade at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He said, that original group was white middle class as a Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. We don't take into account urban experiences, witnessing violence, living in foster care, experiencing bullying, and here, experiencing racism or discrimination, including anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness, anti-Zionism, and I'm going to give it over to Stu to define those. But I just want to say that the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2016 identified racism and discrimination as one of the biggest public health crises in our country. Definitions.
Sure. I'm going to do this one sitting down. So let's be clear that there is a difference between anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness, and anti-Zionism, and I'm just going to read the definitions. So anti-Semitism is the hostility or prejudice against Jewish people. Anti-Jewish is characterized by expressing hostility and discrimination towards Jewish people or the Jewish faith. And anti-Zionism is the opposition to the establishment or support of the State of Israel. The actions, whether it's anti-Zionism, anti-Jewishness, or anti-Semitism, have an adverse effect on all of us. The words that people can use, what our children are facing in schools, in colleges, the fear, have an enormous impact. And I have seen on Facebook horrible things. And one of the things I saw after October 7th is, we deserve it. Okay. No, we don't. But that is horrific, and it reinforces, it deepens the wound. I see a hand up over there.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I do believe at this time, those boundaries are very blurred, and I don't believe that there's a difference between anti-Zionism, anti-Jewishness, or anti-Semitism. The world views us all the same. It does not matter who we are or what our liberal or conservative beliefs are. For example, the atrocities that took place against the kibbutzniks on October 7th, most of those atrocities were made against very liberal, very people who tried to help the Palestinian people, help the Gazans. It did not matter who they were or what their beliefs were. They're all the same. We are all the same. Just like in the Holocaust, in the Holocaust, it did not matter. As long as you had one grandparent who was Jewish, you were Jewish, and you were done. It did not matter. And the world views us all the same, and therefore it is imperative for us to recognize that and to come together, because the truth is we are all the same in the world's view.
100% agree. I 100% agree. That's why I said at the end that it doesn't matter. We all are wounded by those statements. But if you listen to the media sometimes, they will try to feather that out. Anti-Zionism, well, no, it's not the same. Anti-Jewish, no, it's not the same. Yes, it is.
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
But be aware, okay, and call it out like you just did.
Yeah.
When you hear that, call it out and say, no, when you say any of those things, you're attacking me and my people.
Okay. I am going to skip some of these, except to say that trauma involves an emotional response from exposure to an experience involving horror, terror, fear. You don't have to be right there. And threat to your safety or the safety of those around you, and then a change in the way you view yourself and your community, your family, your culture. In typical development, children grow up thinking, I live in a predictable and benevolent world. I'm worthwhile. I'm hopeful and optimistic about my future. I have the ability to impact and change my life. In trauma-impacted development, children grow up thinking, the world is unsafe. People want to hurt me and I'm afraid. And that is what's been ripped open since October 7th. I'm not good, smart, worthy enough for people to care about me. Things won't get better. I need to establish personal power and control. I want to take one moment to talk about what secondary or vicarious trauma is. And that is trauma caused by witnessing or hearing about another person's traumatic experience. So it could be from a student to a teacher, a patient to a therapist, friend to friend, parent to child, culture to us living thousands of miles apart from what is happening. And the symptoms include hypervigilance, avoidance, shutting down, withdrawing, numbness, exacerbation of things like addiction or anxiety, exhaustion, anger, feelings of inadequacy. There's a newer term out there, concept called empathic distress, right? It's different from what is known as compassion and compassion fatigue, feeling for others' pains, but perhaps becoming them. It's caused from hurting for others and feeling helpless about how to help. And after a while, it wears on you. I'm sure that this room is full of empathic individuals, but we're weary. And I want you to I want you to validate yourself if you're really feeling that emotional exhaustion of empathic distress. It is very, very valid. I'm going to skip this. So what happens is the brain is changed by trauma and cumulative trauma and re-traumatization. It weakens the ability to effectively regulate our emotions and manage impulse control. But it goes way beyond that. It's a false dichotomy between brain and body. They're all interconnected. And trauma, cumulative trauma, repeated trauma, historical trauma disrupts development of organs, the circulatory system, the immune system, the inflammatory response system. Now, there are things I mentioned earlier called positive childhood experiences. And this research is relatively new out of Johns Hopkins University in 2017. I don't want to leave you all with despair. There are mitigating and balancing effects that we hopefully have experienced, right? Positive childhood experiences include access to safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments. And both the relationships and environments are essential to create positive childhood experience and help mitigate the impact of trauma. Both relationships and environments have been disrupted since October 7th. This is just a summary of what they found, but one positive childhood experience that the Johns Hopkins study included was participating in community traditions. Essential right now, if you can, if you're able. Feeling as though one belongs, feeling supported by friends, feeling safe and protected. And now I'm going to go turn this over to Stu about resilience and post-traumatic growth. It can happen.
So this is the hopeful part of the presentation. Hope. It's knowing that we've experienced trauma and toxic stress, but we still have the potential to experience well-being. We can move on. And that's what we're going to talk about now in this section. So resilience doesn't mean we forget about it. We don't block it out. We acknowledge it. We know that it's occurred in our lives. It truly means that we can process these experiences and continue living our lives to the best of our ability, despite the struggles that we endure. So, how do we build resilience? Nadine already went over the positive, I'm going to call it positive adult experiences, because this applies to children, but it applies to adults as well. Actually, as adults, we're just big children in many ways. Connection. That's why we're here. We are all connected. We're connected by our culture, we're connected by our faith, and we are connected by the trauma. So wellness. Take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. Okay? I'm sure at work, you've all experienced burnout. I can't tell you how many times when I was practicing before I retired, and I was burnt out, I looked forward to my vacations. That was a way of taking care of myself. Another way to take care of yourself is mindfulness, and I'm going to be going into that more shortly. So negative outlets. Recognize those thoughts and feelings. Be negative. I'm angry. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not afraid about the anti-Semitism. I'm not angry about what happened on October 7th. I acknowledge that I'm enraged. Excuse me, I'm pissed off. And what even makes me angrier is that people that we thought were our friends, who we went and helped, have not come to help us. I'm not a happy camper. And I'm willing to tell anybody that. And I'm willing to tell people and call them out when I hear them saying something that is inaccurate, misinformation, or a lie. That for me is taking care of myself and having a voice. Yeah, they're still embracing healthy thoughts. Okay. So it's important to not to obsess, and I've talked about that before. So to embrace healthy thoughts, don't dwell on the past, learn from it. We make mistakes, things happen, you can obsess about it, you can dwell on it, or you can learn from it and move on. And there's a lot for us to learn. We can learn from this experience. We can learn from the rise of anti-Semitism. We can learn from what happened on October 7th, and we become more resilient and determined that this doesn't happen again, that they don't blow open that metaphorical door. We have people in this community who are survivors of the Holocaust. We can learn from them. So, mindfulness teaches us about joy and having it in our life, and we're going to talk about that. And seek help, okay? There are professional resources out there, and I'm going to share them with you at the end of this presentation.
Okay. The Center on the Developing Child out of Harvard says that the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent or caregiver. Someone that's irrationally crazy about you. I would say you need that in adulthood too, with close family or friends. Someone that just thinks you're great. I'm going to turn it over to Stu to lead us in mindfulness.
run through this quickly. So how do we move from trauma to healing? 5 components: education, emotional regulation, disclosure, narrative, development, and service. So again, let's educate ourselves. Let's learn from this. Focusing on the losses, failures, and uncertainties. This is about emotional regulation. But also try to recall successes and consider the best case possibilities. Disclosure, articulating it, talk about it. Quickly, I have had people who are not Jewish who have come to my house and said, I don't understand this. Tell me about it. We explained it to them. And now I understand. I know of one person, my sister-in-law, whose friend at work came up to her after October 7th, how are you doing? I'm not doing well. I'm crying. 1,200 people have been slaughtered. A couple of days later, she came back and said, how are you doing? And then she said, I don't mean to sound offensive, but I don't understand the Jewish connection to Israel. And she proceeded to hand her something my daughter posted on Facebook. She read it, and when she was done reading it, she was crying and said, now I understand. We need to talk about it within our community and outside of it. Tell your story and focus how we can provide relief for ourselves and for others.
So we just need to look the problem in the face, acknowledge it that we can hold space for, at the same time, for multiple groups of hurting people. And say, this is real. This is all of us. Like you were saying. Okay.
Here comes the exercise. And I'm going to dispense with my notes, because this is really coming out as much as it's coming from the heart. I practice yoga. I'm a yoga instructor. And one of the things I learned was take care of your breath. You'll have it for the rest of your life. Okay? Breathing is so important. It's fundamental. When we are stressed, when we're feeling that trauma, we can get shortness of breath. We can feel, and then when we get shortness of breath, we're getting less oxygen to our brain. We can feel lightheaded, we can feel dizzy. We're not thinking clearly, mentally foggy. So, part of mindfulness is about being aware, focusing and paying attention. And so I'm going to ask you to do a mindfulness exercise. We're going to do 2 exercises. And the first exercise I'm going to ask you to do has to do with, yes, you guessed it, breathing. Okay? So I'm going to ask you just to get comfortable. Put your feet flat on the floor. This goes back to my mindfulness dad joke. And I'm going to ask you, I'll lead you through this. We're going to take 5 breaths. I'm going to ask you to breathe through your nose. But I almost forgot something, because I wanted to talk about silence, okay? Because when we're doing this, and I'm going to put this down, I want you to take in the silence. Be with yourselves. Focus on the breathing. And I want to read to you something. Rabbi Ra'im puts out these wonderful laboratories every Friday. It's a Carol shaking her head, yeah. And he wrote something for Parshat Truma. I want to read this to you.
Can't hear you.
Hey, how's that? I was going with the silence. Rabbi Ra'im puts out these wonderful Devar Torahs. And he wrote this. Silence itself is a sanctuary in that it reveals things hidden in our inner hearts that words fail to articulate. In order for God to dwell in our midst, it's important for us to turn inward in silence, in contemplation, in soft repose, to hear our inner voices, which can only make us whole. So I'm going to ask you now to get comfortable. You can do this with your eyes open or closed, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your nose, and we're going to do this 5 times, and then afterwards we'll just take in the silence. Here we go. Breathe in. Breathe out. 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 And if you have your eyes closed, you can open your eyes and just for a moment sit in the silence. Be with yourself. I'm going to do something very daring, and I kind of went back and forth deciding whether I was going to do this or not. And I decided I'm going to do this. I want to talk to you. The research has shown that prayer and meditation can change the brain in positive ways. It brings serenity, calm, and happiness. Prayer and music connect us. They can lift us up. They can bring us out of despair. They can help us heal. Prayer and music can unify. When you go into the sanctuary, you may not know the person sitting in the pew at the other end of the sanctuary. But the prayer and the music unite us. It can help us feel peace. It can help us to grieve. We don't want to feel alone as individuals or as a community. We want to support ourselves within the community and outside the community. So I'm going to ask you to do something, and this is the daring part, that Pierre asked his audience not to do. I'm going to ask you to sing with me. Yeah, the next slide. And I know that you know this. This is what we want. Oop, did I miss her? There we go. This is what we want. And as we do this, be mindful that you want to focus on the words, on yourself, on the voices around you. This is connectivity. This is being with ourselves. Because out of the many come the one. So please, please, please join me. Ose shalom biroma.
Uya se shalom aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael. Ve'imru, ve'imru, amen. Ose shalom biroma. Uya se shalom aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael. Ve'imru, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, Ve'al Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, Ve'al Yisrael.
And now sit with the silence for a moment. Feels very peaceful. Okay, so now we're going to take questions.
Questions, comments?
Jerry?
I don't have a question. I just would like to thank you for taking the time to join us today, to help us to be part of the community and to come together. And of course, we all hope that there will be healing and that we'll experience resilience. And I thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for asking. Robin, was that what I said? Yeah.
Early on,
I can't
We
hear.
can't hear you.
early on, I believe I heard you mention that there was a study that showed MRI visualization of trauma.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about the source of that if you wanted to look at it?
There are many, many sources over the last couple of decades, maybe a little bit more, 25 years. But we can actually see changes mostly in the part of the brain that's called the primitive or lizard brain, with the hippocampus, amygdala, etc. And what it shows is that people who've experienced trauma, particularly cumulative trauma, the hippocampus shrinks. And we go into this permanent or semi-permanent hyper-alert feeling where we're in that primitive animal brain feeling of experiencing fear for our life and our well-being, and as if the analogy is you're in the woods and there's a bear and you come across a bear, right? And what is activated in that moment, your frontal cortex goes offline and your primitive brain takes over, and you can do the fight, flight, flee, or what?
Freeze.
Or freeze. And a lot of people feel that freezing, or what I also call psychic numbing right now, because we're so overwhelmed with the traumatic images. I've talked to my friend Julie over here. We're both newsaholics many times about this. I grew up the daughter of a newspaper reporter. And so I still, yes, I read the newspaper every morning. And I compulsively read, the New York Times, and I watch the national news, and then I go, I can't take it. Taking a break. And a couple of hours later, back on. Open up, the New York Times or the Morning Call and read again. So I get it, that psychic overload. And what's being activated is that freeze response in the primitive brain because we're so overwhelmed. The brain is beautiful. It protects us. So it kind of shuts down. It's called psychic numbing. This happened as early, we learned about this as early at the end of World War II and the bombings, the atomic bombings in Japan and the liberation of the camps. And that is the term psychic numbing was first coined, and it's a way of protecting us, shutting us down for traumatic information overload, and a way of surviving. Yeah. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I'm curious, so following up on Robin's question. So have they done studies, when, let's say, somebody is exposed to trauma and then they seek help, they, find hope, resilience, have they done before and after scans of the brain to see whether, the amygdala or the part that maybe it would get bigger if they had healed in some ways? I was just curious.
Yes, yes. So, particularly around military veterans, there is quite a plethora of mental health interventions that have been developed over the last couple of decades. Because we didn't have even the term PTSD until after Vietnam. And after those veterans had been home for quite a while. But combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness and stress reduction, and mindful breathing, and the narrative approach. Being able to tell your story in a safe space, in a non-judgmental way. The combination of those, we've seen functional MRIs beforehand with a person struggling with PTSD and afterwards that shows there's new cell generation in place. Any other questions?
Any other questions? And I just want to point out that I put up 2 slides. I just want to let everybody know that Chapter 2, on February 27th, here at the JCC from 7 to 8:30, the clinical committee from Jewish Family Service, as well as the Jewish Community Center, and I found out this morning the Federation are going to be sponsoring continuation of this program. It'll be more of a discussion. I also promised that the clinical committee is the group of healthcare professionals that advise the staff at the Jewish Family Service on healthcare issues. And here are some resources. We want to take those if you're interested, and just point out everybody on here is a therapist, with the exception of Dr. Harvey Akeem. He is a physician out in Easton, but if anybody is feeling depressed or anxious and needs medication, you can contact him. Okay, well, he's not here.
Just want to thank both of our speakers for coming in today. It's very difficult to feel festive on a Super Sunday after a conversation like this, but we thought it was a very important way to start a day about building community, to talk about and recognizing exactly what's on everyone's mind as all time, whether it's on the door is open or closed. We're all thinking about our beloved Israel, and we're all thinking about the rise of anti-Semitism and the trauma that we have suffered as a community. But we also continue to move forward with our community because the future of our community depends on us, on what we do today. So we're going to continue today. The women are going to come in. They're going to do a mitzvah project with Jewish Family Services to bring some cookies to our seniors who are in the homes. I see our elected officials are starting to show up. So shout out to Congresswoman Susan Wild, who was the first one here. Who's happy to be here, and others are coming. Calls are moving into the room, so if you want to make some solicitation or thank you calls are here. And lunch will be at noon, and I see George is already here preparing falafel, so if you don't want to miss falafel, you want to make either cookies or you want to start making calls as we continue our Super Sunday. So thank you for coming, and thank you both for presenting.